before. So today I'm chairing with Natasha as well. Josh is doing a bit of facilitating. We've got Verena and others moderating to help out if you have any issues. And we're going to have our screens on at the start, but then presenters will just have their screens on. So please mute and have your videos off when other people are presenting. But obviously, when we have the discussion later on, we'll have, you're welcome to put your cameras on, of course. And of course, you can expand the slides window and using the icon, as I'm sure you're all aware now. Please use the chat function and put any questions you have in the Q&A and vote any questions you want to vote on. If the slides don't advance for you or you have an echo, please try refreshing your screen. You'll probably lose the chat and the Q&A, but when you rejoin, but that's the way it is, I'm afraid. Like I said, we've got technical assistance. There's a shared notes for Google Doc, which Josh has just put in. We'll be putting that link in. Please add your details into there and your email if you want to keep informed of developments of this group. So I know we're all aware that people want to focus on discussion and not have death by PowerPoint, but we do have 6 case studies to cover, so I'm afraid there will be slides. We're going to try and break these up with a few Menti polls. And we're going to start with a couple of polls now. So while I'm talking, you might want to just click on those links. And just remind people that the objectives of this session are to examine 6 national PID strategy case studies. We're going to try and identify commonalities and divergences between the case studies, assess the potential opportunities and benefits of collaboration, seek an appropriate level of alignment of national PID strategies, discuss the value of the RDA to the RDA community of extending the above activities in the form of an RDA working or interest group, and what the key objectives of that group agreed, if we went forward with one. How such a group could explore national PID strategies and how it would interact with other groups such as the PID interest group, and how it could also interact with activities such as the PID Federation Alliance. But the main question is what an interest group or working group might achieve and how it can interact with other related activities that will help us to take it forward within the RDA. So that's my intro, and I hope you're doing some mentees. And Jessica is kindly sharing where you're all from. So we see we're heavily UK based. I should have said good morning, afternoon, evening, or middle of the night, whatever time it is, to all the people joining. So, and thank you. So I think we've got a wide spread there. Should we move on to the second? While that's coming up, I just also say that in case you haven't seen so I'm getting a bit of a noise in my headset from somebody, I'm not sure who it is, but sorry, the case studies are Australia, so we've got Natasha talking about that. I'm not introducing them, they can do that themselves. Canada, we've got Mark, Finland, Jessica, Netherlands, Clifford, me from the UK, and South America, well, Peru, Brazil, we've got Anna. So those are the 6 case studies we'll be going through, and then we'll be having a discussion afterwards. If you can't see the Menti thing, just expand the screen. So what kind of landscape do you have in your country? So I see no one's answered the second one. So it's heavily weighted on several but separate activities and national coordination in place. Okay. Right, well, thanks for doing that. Without further ado, as time is limited, I'm going to hand over to Natasha and talk about Australian PID strategy.
Chris, I'll just grab my screen.
Just a reminder, I'm actually doing that. Please put questions in the Q&A, and if there's any specific ones that we have time, we'll deal with them after each talk, but we'll get to them at the end. Thanks. Over to you, Natasha.
Great. You can see my screen? Can you see my screen there? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so I am going to talk about the Australian case study, which is leaning towards more of the national coordination in place. So my name is Natasha. I'm from the Australian Research Data Commons, and I'm based in Brisbane. So just to give a bit of background, we have an Australian National Research Infrastructure Roadmap that is set out by our federal government, and that defines that what we're working towards is nationally significant assets, facilities and services to support leading edge research. And there's a lot of talk in that about how research leads to economic growth, jobs, health and welfare, etc. And obviously research being the key to that. And one of the what this national infrastructure comprises is a series of geographically dispersed research facilities that enable our researchers to collaborate. Sometimes they're just for one particular discipline, sometimes they're cross-disciplinary, but they're all funded through our federal government through a program called NCRIS. And the Australian Research Data Commons is one of those NCRIS facilities. And our mission is national based, and it's specifically around transforming digital infrastructure to support leading edge research and innovation. So our main focus is research data infrastructure and building that. And we do that by co-investing with Australian research organisations and building that infrastructure and enabling those research data collections to scale nationally and be accessible to all researchers regardless of which discipline they're in, or whether they sit in government or whether they sit at university or other research facilities. So we provide national information infrastructure. Three of those are listed there. So one is Research Data Australia, which is our discovery portal for research data collections across the whole country. We harvest records from Australian research institutions into that portal, which is a discovery portal. We have identifier services, which I'm going to drill down to in this talk because that's what's relevant here. And we also have a vocabulary service as well that helps, all of these things help enable research data to be fair. So looking at PIDS as national infrastructure, so the ARDC provides PIDS services free of charge to the Australian research sector. We have a DOI service that we offer in partnership with the DataCite, so we're the consortium lead for Australia, and we cover the fees there for minting DOIs for data, software, grey literature, instruments, etc. We have a very active instruments group, so looking at what kind of identifiers are right for instruments, and that feeds into the PID-Inst at RDA. So we also have RAID, which is an identifier for research projects that's actually directly operated by ARDC. We're an IGSN registration agency, the International Geosample Number, although that's applied not just to geo, but to all kinds of physical objects collected during research. We have a Pearl service that links to pages describing research grants from our major funders, or we hope to move to DOIs in the future for that in partnership with Crossref. And we have a handle service as well. And so those are the services offered by ARDC to the sector. And then we have ORCID, an Australian ORCID consortium that has almost all of the Australian universities as members of that consortium, plus a number of other research facilities. And that consortium is led by the Australian Access Federation. So between the services offered by ARDC to the sector and the consortium led by AAF, these form the backbone of enabling fair research outputs via PIDS in Australia. So that's our basic national coordination in place for research. So just to finish off this, some of what we looked at in terms of the national infrastructure for PIDS, we look at, what kind of national adoption and coverage can we get for these PIDS? What is useful across disciplines? What are the main kind of PIDS that people want access to? We look at efficient national provision of these services and also look at strategic national direction. So where are we headed with our research and with the identifiers? So we very much also play a leadership role in this. And one of the ways we looked at which PIDs to support in ARDC is we look at PIDs in research workflows. So this diagram shows you very basic kind of process of research and what kind of identifiers are needed at different points in the research workflows. And that enables us to say, well, these are the types of identifiers we want to be able to support from ARDC. So in looking at our portfolio, we look at the coverage of the key elements of research, as I've already mentioned. But we also look at the different technical approaches that the PIDs have and how easy it is to operate and facilitate access to those. And we also look at attributes of good PID systems. So, for example, sustainability of PID organisations would be one of them, or making sure that that PID system that we support is not going to go away anytime soon. So we also have a policy and a roadmap. We asked Josh Brown, who's on this call, to do a review of our PID portfolio probably about 2 years ago now, or maybe 18 months. I don't want to say it's that long. How could it be that long? But he did. And that reaffirmed our roadmap, and it enabled us to put in place a PID policy as well. And in that policy, that kind of highlights that PIDs are a core component of national and global infrastructure. And therefore, the PID services that we offer are offered in partnership with international PID service providers. And we also make it a condition of our co-investment in projects that these projects implement PIDs in the research data infrastructure that they build and in the collections that are produced. And we note that the greatest value of PIDs is at global scale, which is why ARDC is involved in a lot of PID initiatives internationally. So we also have a roadmap. I'm not going to go through that in a lot of detail. You've seen, I've already gone through the identifiers that we offer through ARDC nationally. Just the bottom one there is a linked data service offered by one of the Australian government, a sort of Australian government linked data working group, and we are looking at onboarding that one into our PID services as well. And also, while we don't run these services, we also would offer active support for ORCID, and we are active supporters of the Australian ORCID Consortium, and also RAW, the Research Organisations Registry. And as I mentioned, with PIDs for instruments, we run a instruments group there. So that gives you an overview of what we are doing in Australia. And as I said, I think it's more towards national coordination in place. So I will leave it there and hand over back to Chris, I think.
Thanks, Natasha. Don't have any questions coming through, although Matthew's asked, can you provide a link to the ARCD PID policy? So
yes, will do.
Other questions in the Q&A chat function as well. Please add them as you think of them. So thanks, Natasha. Going to move on to Mark for Canada, who isn't going to use slides. Mark, are you there? Yeah. So I hand that straight over to him. Thanks, Mark.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So I will, I'm just going to speak to the Canadian approach. And as I do that, I'm going to put some links in the chat for people to take a look at. Canada's probably in what I would call somewhat of a formative transitional phase. I've just put in the link for a new organization, that's a national organization that is being formed in Canada. It's called ENDRIO, which is the stands for the new Digital Research Infrastructure Organization. So very creative name there. And as part of ENDRIO's transition, so the ENDRIO was essentially created about a year ago and is literally in the process of hiring senior staff and full teams in the different components. The three primary pillars in ENDRIO are research data management, research software, and high performance computing. So it's combining the national compute organization, which is called the Compute Canada Federation, and two of the national, or the two national research data management organizations. One is the organization that I represent, which is Research Data Canada. And the other one is emerged from the larger academic university libraries in Canada. It's called Portage. And Portage, as of 2 weeks ago, was now fully funded and part of ENDRIO. So that link I just put in will take you to the Portage landing page, which links out to an external page because that transition is so new that the Portage services and resources have not yet been fully integrated into the fabric. So those two organizations, Research Data Canada and Portage, are merging into the new national organization. And a third national organization that is important in this PID landscape is called CRKN, or the Canadian Research Knowledge Network. So those three data management focused organizations have, to a large degree, been kind of driving the PID strategy in Canada. For those that don't know, Canada is a confederation, as we like to say, so a group of provinces and territories that are represented by a national government, but also have their own provincial authority in many contexts. And one of those provincial authorities is education. So building a national strategy can be a bit challenging, but having said that, there's been some advances in the last while. CRKN is the national body of those three that tends to be the home of the various PID initiatives, and the one I just put in is the new DataCite Canada Consortium. So that's a fairly new development that was spearheaded by CRKN and Portage in particular, and that will, of course, represent Canadian interests in the DataCite context using the consortial model. And then the other one that's been around for a couple of years, also administratively housed at CRKN, is the ORCID Canada. So that is a national organization that has close to 40 members in the ORCID Canada family, if you will. So it's been going for a couple of years now, and represents the interests of those individual organizations in terms of taking advantage of ORCID technologies. So even though we have these national approaches, with the emergence of Endrio in the last couple of years, there's been a kind of a wait and see approach. The hope is that Endrio will not only facilitate these national services that CRKN is currently housing, but will also inject funding to hopefully lower the bar so that folks don't have to pay to be a member, or pay less to be a member, so that we can lower that bar for the use of PIDs like DataCite and ORCID. Finally, the other two things that are being done nationally to approach a consistent and sustainable policy and coordination for PIDs nationally. One is this. It's the second version. It's 5 years ago, RDC published a document making recommendations around PIDs nationally, which included a set of recommendations targeting specific actors in the data management community. So this is version 2. It's currently open for community consultation, even though there are elements in the document that are not quite finished. So this is one that recommends best practices throughout. And then at the end, as I said, there will be updated recommendations regarding PIDs across the country. And then the most recent activity hosted by the three organizations that I highlighted, CRKN, RDC, and Portage, are collaborating on a 6-part webinar series highlighting the use of PIDs in the research ecosystem. So that's, I think the 5th one is coming up. And as with many of these things in a national context in Canada, they're offered in English and French, or simultaneously with translation. So the final comment I would say is we are working with our also funding colleagues. Our tri-councils recently released their data management policy, which had been in development for some time. And while that data management policy doesn't specifically mandate the use of PIDs such as ORCID, it does intersect very nicely with the goals and intentions nationally in Canada. So that's it for me, Chris.
Thank you, Mark. So there's about a 5-second delay when I click on the microphone. I think Jez is asking about tri-councils or tribe councils. I'll let you answer that in the chat. So, tri-councils. Okay. So we're now having a third Menti poll, which just seemed to jump for me. That is the right one. Jessica, did that advance? So I'm just seeing the results. So sorry, yes, I'm not switching into the Menti poll and adding my answer. So I apologize for that. So yeah, the importance of levels of interoperability for PIDs. So there's organisational seems to be coming up as the most relevant at the moment. Jessica, sorry, is there anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, it was so okay. I just wondered if you could see.
No, sorry, it was because it jumped and I thought I was looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, so these are actually the interoperability framework sort of levels.
Seems quite balanced there, isn't it? Legal, the least high, the least relevant, and technical now is sort of taking it at the lead from the early runner of organisational. So 21 responses. We've got about 30 people on here and a few more joining. So just give it a minute. I mean, we will be sharing the results of these afterwards, and in the notes. So actually, technical's taken a strong lead now.
Chris, there's a question there of what is organisational interoperability?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So anyone want to come in on that one? Because I mean, we talk about interoperability between systems, I would have thought, or is it interoperability between the actual PIDs themselves?
Yeah, and also maybe the like how that there are like social interoperability and ways to communicate and organize them.
I was just going to say maybe it's I didn't create that one, but I suspect it's relating to the alignment of policies, strategies, those kinds of things that allow this kind of interoperability, for example, in a national context. Seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. In the interest of time, sorry to move on quickly. Actually, it is over to you now, Jessica, for your presentation from Finland.
Okay. So I will turn on my camera. Hi, everyone. And then I will try to share another tab. I had some technical problems earlier, but I hope now this works, at least to some extent. So I would like to make a short sort of overview of the situation in Finland. So I come from CSC, which is the IT Center for Science in Finland, which is owned by the government and the research or higher education institutions, actually, not for profit company, just as a background. So this is why I also maybe take my starting point from this Finnish public sector interoperability work. We have we had actually very strict regulations about doing architecture and interoperability work. The law has now changed, but there's still a real requirement for the government to share terminologies and share their information components, and also there are shared tools for creating and publishing application profiles. The PIDs are not explicitly a part of this work yet, which is something we've been working or trying to promote for some time. But it's sort of implicit there. Traditionally in Finland, then we have a national library that has been very actively promoting and developing the URN services. And also they offer, provide an ontology like platform or service, finta.fi, which provides like SCOS vocabularies and terminology control vocabularies for not only libraries, but also other branches of government. So this has been things this is sort of the landscape where then CSC is active, and we also then use these tools as we are providing many services to these our owners. We also have a national PID forum that has been active for many years. It has been in the beginning very informal, and it's now becoming more and more formal. But we're trying we meet like twice a year and we have been like discussing this, how we could like promote the PIDs in this national interoperability work. There are cultural heritage sector organization, land survey, also some municipal like actors, and yeah, of course, then scientific fields and research organization. And we really try to share knowledge. We usually meet like twice a year or something like this, but it's growing more and more formal and getting more linked now to the consortium we're having, but it's still an informal network. So CSC is also the consortium lead of DataCite, and CSC has a quite high level generic like PID policy, and we're also at CSC hosting, for instance, the Language Bank of Finland, Clarin infrastructure. So we have like LAN and UDAT services and so forth. So we have many national services where PIDs are used of different types. And we feel that it's very important to promote like this trustworthiness and the risk management. So in our DataCite policy for Finland, we have quite clear regulations or descriptions about the responsibilities of the organization who joins and starts minting and these PIDs. So the growth has been a bit slow due to this, because it's been sort of a learning curve there, but there's a huge interest, as there is a lot of need for DOIs. We also coordinate the National ORCID Consortium, also facilitate this. In Finland, there is a quite strong My Data approach to this. In Finland, the researchers create their own ORCIDs, and then we just try to support and facilitate this and try to really build services that offer this added value for the researchers. And it's possible to link the ORCID to the national, we have this federation for research organizations or the higher education institutions for this ID system. It's possible to link this. So we are building a national research information hub. Now these following slides I've lent from my colleague, borrowed from my colleague Tommi Suominen, who's the architect for this, but we are really trying to prepare as extensive PID graph as possible in this service. For instance, now we have PIDs or URNs for infrastructures. We will probably be taking into use RIDE, RAID identifiers. We are giving identifiers to many different things and try to get all these linked, or have the possibility to link all these. The National Library has also developed a database for actors' IDs. So here just some examples of the like sources where we are collecting information to the National Research Information System. This information is really the basis for how the government shares money or funds the organizations. So they are really motivated to provide this information, and we then try to collect as many identifiers as possible from this. We also have a active open science coordination network, which has produced a national PID recommendation, which is also on quite generic level, but there are some principles about that. For instance, that when a data set becomes is published, then at that point it should have a persistent identifier. And also we wanted to give a recommendation about the data site's relation types to be used as much as possible in our national own research data catalog. We have actually managed with some work to include also the credit taxonomy, which was an interesting exercise, but we have them both there. But we want to encourage this use of describing relation types as much as possible. And also one important point in our opinion is that identifiers should be identifiable for both machines and human users, depending on the use case. So, and that persistent identifiers that are meant for human users should be really user-friendly. We're of course looking at the development in the EOSC. So CSC is also active in, for instance, FAIR. And I think there's important developments going on, which we are following, and I think it's really good, and it also shows this EOSC PID policy paper how many different types of concepts are involved and different roles. So one more comment from the open science coordination work. As we saw this steep learning curve for the organization to implement persistent identifiers, we created a stepping stones documentation or document, which can be found on Zenodo also, where we encourage the organizations to really look at their whole information management and systematically evaluate and assess the different aspects and dimensions, and also to take into account the costs that always are there sooner or later. So we're trying to use this published PID as a promise. So what I personally often find that there are like different use contexts. Clearly there is the PID graph context, and then there is this other context where we have the research data management, and we have researchers who want to build very highly automated processes and machine actionable stuff, and to manage their create reproducible data flows or whatever with PIDs, and sometimes these two discussions, I think, cause a bit confusion. So we're trying to create the bits of separate. Of course, they are interlinked and get connected and support each other, but sometimes it's important to define which use case you are talking about. And also, especially now then when we are talking about dynamic research data, I think there are still many things to be solved, and we need to agree on ways to manage this. We have, as I mentioned, a National Research Data Service, fairdata.fi, and there we have solved it. We actually give the data site DOIs to data that we have offer also that are kept in our services, so we can be stored, that we can ensure the integrity of the data. But we have also made this decision that we can have this type of growing data set where you can add data. So this is, and now we are also planning then separate services for dynamic research data to support reproducibility and data citation. And finally, I just want to mention quickly that we are also at CSC, we're developing a microservice now where we manage the suffixes of the PIDs and where we can link them, so we can really ensure that the CSC PID policy is like implemented, and we really can for instance, use the same suffix if we have first the URN for a data set and later create a DOI for it and so forth. So, and yeah, as you see there, we are also a member of the EPIC consortium. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A, but I hope people can answer those in the Q&A, or like I said,
okay, yeah, sure.
Because I think we need to move on quickly to Clifford from the Netherlands.
There we go. Hello.
Great, I can see it. It's not full screen yet, but they're there.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
There's the present button at the top. Do you not see the present button?
Oh,
Oh, it's gone now.
let's see. This worked fine a moment ago. Try this again. Share. And yeah, I don't see anything here.
Well, we can see them anyway. So you want to just perhaps just go through them.
Can you share them? Yeah, can you share them from your side? And I can stop that one.
Clifford, we see them, I think. Nice.
We did see them. It just wasn't in full screen.
Just go ahead and.
Chris, you downloaded them, right?
Yeah, I've got them. Hang on, just bear with me.
All right. Otherwise, I need to kind of look at them. Okay. Well, while Chris is loading my slides, the backup copy. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to this event. And
you see those all right?
Yeah, I can now. Thank you, Chris. And thanks to my colleagues for the opportunity to present here. So I'm Clifford Tatum from the SURF organization in the Netherlands. And let's see, advance next slide, please. There we go. So in this presentation, there are 4 parts. I'm going to take a look at the legacy PID systems within the Netherlands, the ORCID consortium, our recently approved NVO, which is the National Funder PID strategy, and the development of a National PID advisory board. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to discuss each of these, but just to give you an impression of a key point for all countries, I suspect, which is that PIDs existed before all of this this recent period with all of this organization and ideas about national strategies. We have multiple research identifiers, ORCID being the prominent one. I've listed ORCID there, but it's not one of the legacies. ISNI, of course. We had a national digital author ID for a few years until ORCID came on the scene. So it's been discontinued, but it's still in our data. It characterized these legacy systems are first that each of them emerged in a very situated context, particular use case. Many cases for data, for example, in particular fields. And each operates independently without much coordination. Next slide, please. So we enter ORCID here. This changes the dynamic a little bit because it provides a forum for at the university level. So for universities to discuss specifically ORCID, but PIDs in particular. We started an ORCID pilot in 2015. It was, I think this is maybe different for some of the other countries. It was organized bottom up. That means that we didn't have a national mandate or any particular mandate. We, from SURF, organized and reached out to universities and began with 5 universities who were already looking at ORCID at the time. And after about a year and a half, we transitioned that into a proper business consortium, the ORCID NL. Of course, the ORCID replaced our DAI, the Digital Author ID, which was in use then. At present, all research universities plus the Royal Academy Institutes and GÉANT, an outlier, are members, and it's a fairly stable consortium of 16 members. And along the years, a key focal point about implementation and managing ORCID and recruiting researchers to ORCID, as well as building out workflows, was the need for reliable metadata exchange, and particularly with funders in relation to funded projects. And this sort of galvanized people in their interest in the idea of PID systems, changing information through PID systems. Next slide, please. Our discussions eventually intersected with our funders' interest in ORCID. So we at SURF worked together with the MBO to develop a funder strategy, which was this month finally approved by the board of directors. But in it, they lay out a long-term strategy that focuses on their fundamental kinds of information that forms the basis of most of their workflows. And that is information about researchers, organizations, and grants. So we have the 3 ORCID Crossref grant ID and research organization IDs in plural, because there are several of them in use, but we anticipate the ROR to be the de facto standard. In addition, with the funder participating in the PID community, so joining the national at the national level, so joining the ORCID consortium and joining a national level PID advisory board, as well as to collaborate with other funders, for example, with Science Europe. There aren't any plans yet, but that's one of their objectives, and to help shape the PID landscape. For those interested, this strategy document is available in Zenodo at this link. Next slide, please. Now, the PID strategy, funders in general, and in our case, the PID strategy for the funder, is useful on a number of dimensions. In particular, funders offer a clear use case that covers the full life cycle of a well-defined, temporally and financially bounded research project. And this is interesting because one of the things we discovered in the ORCID consortium is that universities all do things differently in terms of the kinds of metadata they collect. Projects aren't so well, we're not able to define them so well. They merge into other projects, they sprout limbs. And the funder provides us a way to think about a kind of generic project lifecycle that is related also to one of the project modes in universities. It also does help with the challenge of metadata exchange with the institutional crisis of funded projects. So, and the final point there is it provides the basis for us to start thinking about a national strategy. Next slide, please. And that's where we are now. We're in startup mode with a small PID advisory board to provide strategic guidance on the contours of a national PID roadmap. And in this context, the board will look at three things explicitly. First, the existing PID system use cases in the Netherlands. So trying to bring in the those that I showed in the PID landscape. Next is to factor in implications of a Dutch open knowledge base, the OKB. That's a long story. I'll just mention quickly that we're looking at a national level repository for all research metadata, in which a PID substrate would be quite important. As well as we all know, this domain is quite dynamic, PID domain. So the idea is the board would then keep an eye on international PID developments that used to say associated with things like EOSC and open air or many other things. So that is, we're just getting underway with that. That is our ambition towards a national PID roadmap. And next slide, please. I believe that is it. Yes, thank you.
Sorry about the delay. Too many screens. Too much going on. Thanks, Clifford. I think I haven't been able to follow the Q&A and the chat so much during that, but so I'm not going to waste time switching to that. But we do have another Menti question for you, and that's going to be around in building a resilient PID landscape. Focus should be put on, and then there's a list of things to select. I won't read them all out because they're on the poll. So I think we might need I don't know if we need the link again, but yeah, I mean, you can just go to menti.com and use the code 81609903. Thanks, Jessica. So we do have just two more case studies. I know it's time's against us, but we will. I'm next, so I'll go as quickly as I can, and then hand over to Anna for the Peru and Brazil, and then we'll open the floor for a bit more chat. Answer some of the questions coming through. They're all quite equal from what I can see. We've got 16 responses. Okay, in the interest of time, get all of that. Thanks, Bill. I'll move on, but yeah, we've got. I thought I'd stop at 20, so we've gone over that. So yeah, they're all pretty much balanced. But please keep adding if you want to. So, excuse me. Right now to share my application window. Right. Thanks, Giselle. I think you can stop sharing your screen now because that's pretty much equal. So hopefully you can all see my screen, my slides. I'll keep going until I hear otherwise. Brilliant, thank you. So let's speed up by just saying that's me. And get to the next slide, just one slide about JISC and open research. We've got a booth, so if you want more information on what we do, please go to there. It's sort of a bit hidden under sponsors. There's a JISC logo icon, you can click on that, and there's a banner on the homepage you can click on. But really, I just want to say this because we have a research strategy and we have an open research mission, and that's to help members embrace the benefits of open research by removing barriers, embedding open practices, and developing open infrastructure. And of course, integration of PIDs and the work we're doing on the PIDs is all about removing barriers and enabling open research. So why have we done this? We've been doing it for a number of years, but there's lots of activities that have been going on and lots of recommendations which become more mandatory. We've got the Plan S work, GoFair, OECD, and EOSC. I'm not going to go into the details of all those because they're on the slide. But also there's things like the Wellcome Trust mandated the use of ORCIDs in the grant application system since 2015. So PIDs are important. They're important to JISC and they're important to the work we're doing, which is why we're doing this work. And also Professor Tickell recommendations also said that we just be leading on selecting and promoting a range of unique identifiers, including ORCID, in collaboration, which is key, with sector leaders, with relevant partner organisations. So we're not doing this on our own. It says lead there, but we're working with the sector on behalf of our members, who are mostly universities and research organisations. There are others, but please go to our booth to find out more details on that. So, like I said, we've been doing this for a number of years. It's an open access workflow. And I also should have said, obviously didn't say at the start, you can see two logos on there, More Brains and JISC, because pretty much all the work of this has been done by More Brains, and Josh is on in this session as well. So I'm taking credit for some of this, but I'm managing the project, but Josh and More Brains pretty much do all the work. So thanks to them. So yes, there's a workflow here on open access. So it's been doing this for a number of years. Started with real world workflows and pain points. This workflow is through Gold Open Access, looking at what the priority PIDs for some of these workflows, what are the points of integration, some of the pain points, and how the information flows through the system. From this work, we've come up with 5 priority PIDs, which are similar to some of the ones you see on national strategies, which from other countries. So it's looking at similarities. You can see some of them already. Grants through cross-ref, projects through the research activity identifier RAID, persons through ORCID ID. JISC is actually runs the UK consortium in for ORCID. Sorry, the JISC UK ORCID consortium. If you didn't already know, we do. And organisation identifiers through research organisation registry, and outputs through cross-ref and data site DOIs. So there's also, with working with the community, coming up with 5 areas of activity that we felt would help the UK optimise the use of persistent identifiers. This would be a multiple consortium to ensure equitable access to PIDs, targeted interventions, benefits analysis to show what is the benefit of adopting PIDs, not just saying PIDs are a good idea and a great thing, let's integrate them, but trying to put some actual cost benefit figures onto that. Having the governance to coordinated, so you're not depending on sort of small group PID providing organisations. And what's the sustainability, which obviously comes up quite a lot at the RDA plenaries. Think about the persistence in persistent identifiers. There are also links here to some of all the reports where these are referenced from. So they'll all be in the shared document later. So in the last year, in 2020, we were running the UK PIDs for Open Access project. There was a number of focus groups, 28 attendees across 5 different groups, looking at those priority PIDs, and these were the key findings. You needed a governance model that allowed sustainability, but it should be community driven, like I said before, not just one organisation or a few organisations. But prioritise easy wins that add value to multiple PIDs. I'm thinking globally, although this is a UK project and this has happened across all where we've done PIDs, it's international, it's not just UK focused. We need leadership, we need conversations at the high level, and of course, and very importantly, we need outreach, providing support to all stakeholders. There's also a survey which was run the second half of, in the summer of last year, and there's the results there. It was mostly the UK, but it's 70% from research or institutions. Key findings from that: the technical burden and cost of integration are too high for PIDs, and the perceived value of them is too low. So That's sort of a barrier. And metadata needs to be predictably present, needs to be consistent, and needs to be reliably maintained and updated. I don't know if you were at PID, there's a lot of talk about the metadata value, which obviously is valuable, but is that more important? I think they're more important than of equal value. And benefits, PIDs being desired across the sector to enable better operability and data reuse. The priorities, sorry, I don't know if you can hear my emails popping up. I should have closed those before, but hopefully you can't hear them. I don't know why I'm having a surge of emails suddenly. Priorities, respondents want to see PIDs use optimally funding systems, which hosts research outputs and research information management tools. So with this consortium work, which was run last year, and the task groups that was bringing together national agencies, funders, institutions, research managers, publishers, and PID providers to explore the business case for multiple PID consortium to lower the barriers of PID adoption. So there was key findings here. I'm not going to read all through those. But, like I said, getting PIDs into high-level strategic discussions, need that leadership. There's a strong support for multiple PID consortium, but we need the governance and sustainability models for that long-term community engagement. We need to prioritize the interventions, and that's not just saying, and I'll leave that. So outreach there is needs to provide support, information, and guidance. But sorry, just looking at the interventions, it's looking at the workflows that we're going to do, and some, how we can actually do some of these interventions. So in bringing the community together, is looking at the value propositions, taking these to the highest level possible to get to the root of the need for PIDs for each of the groups. So we had efficiency gains there, probably quite small for you to read, which were cross-cutting across different groups. We had part one for funders, meeting policy demands, institutions, core benefit for that was better research management support. Content providers, it was simplifying and serving metadata needs and reducing the administrative burden for researchers. So in bringing that community together, that's pretty much the work that we've been doing with More Brains last year and into this year. But to deliver those efficiencies, we do need the people with technical and community expertise. And the value of the consortium approach has sort of come out through that work, and to maximise returns on a national investment in PIDs. So, I'm going to show you a bit about the cost-benefit analysis in a second, but it's will the benefits of that adoption justify the cost of the consortium? And we can only answer that by doing a rigorous cost-benefit analysis. So, as I mentioned about governance, we need a research identifier national coordinating committee, RINC, unfortunately named, but that's what we're with at the moment. If anyone thinks of a better name for that, please suggest it, but we haven't come up with one. So the RINC is really the governance, provide the strategic insights, shaping the priorities and the focus of these activities and the policies in the UK, liaising with the international PID providers and governance structures, and aligning those PID integrations. And again, ensure that all the individuals and organisations in the UK research community have equitable access to the PIDs they need. So where we are at the moment, we're doing, or More Brains are doing, the workflows, and that's a Miro board, and we'll be publishing those in a bit more of an easy to read format, because you see it's quite complex to go through some of these funding workflows, and the research data ones even more complicated. But there's there's four workflows there. There's funding, institutional research management, content publication, articles, and data. We're going to be publishing two of those, funding and content for articles in June, and the others by the end of August, with a sort of an overview and showing that with the community. But it's really just to sort of show the workflow, the flow through something like that, like the publication of articles, for example, and where the pain points are, where the PIDs are used, and showing that. So it's searching for the perfect point of real-world activities to plug in those PIDs where they're missing and gather metadata, and of course where the ones that are used and how they add value. So there's a lot of integration between them. And a key piece of work we're doing at the moment, which will come to an end at the end of May, is that this cost-benefit analysis. And I should stress this is, going to be shared with the community results. I think it's going to be quite useful and important to see. So the three areas that benefits accrue there are metadata reuse, automation, aggregation and analysis. And we're currently collecting data and conducting interviews in those areas. And I'm going to move on quickly because I'm running out of time. And so, yes, and when we've got those workflows, understanding that pathway to getting to that perfect world. And at the moment, well, and again in May, we have the first meeting of the RINC, which is just being set up and people being invited to that and having that balanced community representation. So that's where we are at the moment. It's really working on the workflows, the cost-benefit analysis, and setting up the RINC. So there's a poster for more information, the GIST booth, and I'm going to say thank you and move on very quickly because I'll check the Q&A to Anna, who's going to talk about Peru and Brazil.
Hello. Let me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I'll try to be quick to leave space for the discussion. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for being there. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what's going on in Latin America and to illustrate kind of the diversity in terms of research information management in the region. I'll start with the three initiatives that I think that play a key role in the region in terms of spreading best practices and working on standardizing some of the flows. And also I'll talk about these two countries' experiences, which are Brazil and Peru are the countries that I think that are in the most further, let's say like this, in the conversations about PIDs. None of the countries of the region have a PID per se strategy or PID discussions at a national level, but there is awareness of the importance of persistent identifiers in data management, in information research management. So just to give a little bit of a background of how the research is organized in the region, there are a lot of differences, of course, and this is what I'd like to illustrate, but also there are a lot of similarities. One of the similarities is in Latin America, both scientific research and communication of its results are mainly publicly funded activities. It is also at public universities that the majority of the research is undertaken and the majority of journals are published. There is a structure that normally is, the countries have one major national funding agency, mainly public, but also private universities and research institutes that are linked to the government. Some few countries like Brazil have also decentralized funding agencies, and these agencies, the national agencies, are responsible for establish the national policies, carry the evaluation processes, and provides funding to research and to researchers. So in this frame, university journals and institutional repositories play a crucial role in the dissemination of the scientific knowledge and this equal access to content. So this is why I would like to highlight these three initiatives that help to promote equal access to scientific knowledge and tools, and highlighting the scholarly-led regional initiatives. And this is La Referencia, which is a network of national repositories, Redalyc and Cielo, which are indexing databases, and they have a key role, the three organizations, in spreading best practices and standardizing information workflows. So Just to finalize with this initial part, both Redelic and Cielo projects work in close relationship with PKP project because OJS, which is the open journal system, it's an open platform for submission, is widely used in the region, and in this sense, it plays a role because of its plugins. Notably with Crossref and ORCID, it plays an important role in implementing persistence identifiers in local journals workflows. In terms of PID adoption in the region, Crossref GOIs are widely used for publications. ORCID IDs are also in exponential growth in the region. There are ORCID consortia in Brazil and Colombia. In Brazil is the one that I'm going to mention. It's formed by 6 governmental agencies. And in Peru, in Colombia, the consortia is formed by 61 universities. There is also a project of a database, a data site consortium in Brazil. So, starting with the project in Brazil, the actors that you are seeing in the slide are the ones that conform the Brazilian CRIS system, which is called Connecti, and it's also the organizations that conform the ORCID consortium in Brazil. So Brazilian research, Brazil is the country in the region who publishes the most, if we can consider this as a fair parameter of research productivity. And in terms of number of articles published, it is increasing at a rate of more than 10% a year, which is a 5 times higher rate than the world average. So Brazil is today amongst the top 15 countries in terms of research productivity. So much of this growth can be traced to progressive government policies and programs that support both research projects and the information infrastructure needed for the collaboration and the dissemination of results. So I'm going to give some examples of how things are going in Brazil. So underlying these policies and programs is a technology infrastructure that supports sharing of information between systems. So RNP, which is listed there, has the CAFE project, which is the federated access to researchers to the sites with a single username and password. So this is something that works very well here in Brazil. People can log in with their ORCID credentials. Another example is the use of Crossref GOIs and ORCID IDs in Cielo publishing platforms. More recently, CNPq and EBICT are working on a consortium for the adoption of data sites GOIs for data. And as I said, all the 6 organizations have created a consortium around ORCID adoption in 2017. And through this consortium and the integrations with the API, more than 300,000 researchers are now connected to CAPES, CNPq, /Lattes CV, and Cielo systems with their ORCID IDs. So numbers are very encouraging. Brazil is a big country, but there is still to do in terms of data interoperability and adoption of standards, because what happens is that even within the same organization, and I'm not only talking about universities, I'm talking about CAPES and CNPq, which are the funding agencies in Brazil. They have systems that have been built independently one of each other, and they cannot communicate. So, for example, CAPES is responsible for the evaluation. Every 4 years, they do an evaluation of the graduate programs. This is a very big task force, but they cannot collect data directly from CNPq's CV Lattice platform because problems of interoperability. So I would say this is the most important problem in the region. In-house and very siloed systems. So just to finish with the Connect Brazil. So the ORCID Consortium and Connect Brazil were born at the same time, as conversations involving ORCID and other organizations helped shaping the National CRIS project, in which ORCID plays a key role in the individual's disintegration process in Brazil, as in many other countries. There are local identifiers for people, but mainly they use the ID, so the national ID or the social security number, which are personal information. So this is why ORCID is getting a lot of traction in the region, especially when there are foreign researchers invited and they have to provide their passports number or name of the father, the mother, and things like this. So to avoid all of this sharing of personal information, ORCID plays an important role as well as a signing option in the systems. So these same organizations have supported the emergence of Brazilian research on the global stage and are part of the Connected Brazil project. They are the same, they are playing a leadership role in leveraging ORCID across national research information infrastructures. So the project Connect Brazil is led by CAPES. CAPES is one of the two national funding agencies in Brazil, and it's linked to the Ministry of Science, of Education, sorry. CNPq is linked to the Ministry of Science and Technology. So CAPES leads this consortium that aims at building a national platform integrating education, science, technology, and innovation data to rationalize national information systems and make information available according to international best practices. It aims also at creating a research information ecosystem where the researchers are in the center, integrating state and national systems and optimizing the knowledge management. So open persistent identifiers are preferred, and in this sense, DOI, ORCID IDs, and WAR IDs are at the core of this strategy. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Peruvian experience. The Peruvian, Peru and Brazil are the only two countries that are thinking about information management at a national level, and there are already implementing at different stages a CRIS system for the country. So in Peru, there is a law of science, technology, and technological innovation that establishes that the development, promotion, consolidation, transfer, and dissemination of science, technology, and innovation are of public necessity, of national interest, and are fundamental pillars for the country's productivity and development. So CONCITEC, which is the National Council of Science, Technology, and Technological Innovation in Peru, is in charge of the development of policies, regulation, and promotion of activities related to science technology in the country. It governs the ensemble of public funds for the research and the evaluation. Around 200,000 individuals, around 25 governmental institutes, and 145 universities and other higher education institutes. So in terms of infrastructure, CONCITEC manages a national CV platform, a national aggregator for open access repositories, which is harvested by La Referencia, by the way, and other applications for storing information about researchers and innovators, evaluators, institutions, publications, and projects. So each of these entities have different systems managing this information. So these systems were implemented independently, covering specific needs, and with ad hoc data models, and do not interoperate, which is also a burden for the researchers, of course. So this is my almost last slide, sorry. So CONCITEC identified through a survey they did the need of improving the quantity and the quality of the information of their own research activities and research. And to address this, CONCITEC looked for the best practices and global standards in research information management. And also they worked on the establishment of an adequate national CRIS infrastructure. So the Peru CRIS, which is a 4 years project co-financed by the World Bank, is pioneer in the region, and they work together with partners that are appearing on the right of the screen. So clearly this project was inspired by other initiatives, especially in Europe, and these organizations and initiatives gave also support for the project in Peru. So CONCITEC has an integration of the national CV system with ORCID since 2016, and currently more than 41,000 individuals have their ORCID IDs linked to the national CV. So this was a campaign over several years that ORCID did with together with CONCITEC to help researchers, educate researchers, and their institutions on how and why it is important to use persistent identifiers and ORCID in this case. So through this project, CONCITEC recognizes the urgent need to define and promote the adoption of persistent identifiers for people, institutions, projects, and funding, and have been promoting their adoptions amongst researchers and their institutions. There is an expectation from the Peruvian community on CONCITEC's role in the establishment of a national CRIS infrastructure in the country. And just to finalize, from these examples and experiences, I'd say that the wider adoption of persistent identifiers in research workflows is still incipient in Latin America. The adoption of global standards in research information management seems to depend on the vision of key stakeholders and their ability to embed them in national policies and actions. Moreover, research institutions tend to lack dedicated resources to make these necessary changes and to comply to the demands of the funding agencies. But there is a growing interest, a growing awareness and adoption of these standards following best practices and experience in other countries. So these experiences and also the experience in Portugal, the PT CRIS, are leading the way to more interoperability for the Latin American research. Thank you. Looking forward to your questions.
Thanks, Anna. And Natasha, I was handing over to you for sharing this bit, but I was just going to say we do have 3 more Menti polls, and I realise we're running out of time. So I'm terribly
We have completely run out of time, I'm afraid. I just really want to make the use of the next 12 minutes, I think it is, to see what people thought. So to summarize a few of the similarities that I noticed in those discussions, there were some commonalities were around things like having a national PID policy in place, some sort of policy, about having some sort of coordinating network or coordinating group that was looking at that policy and the implementation of that policy and some sort of roadmap. A lot of us have sort of government backing on that as well. And then there was some commonality on the types of PIDs that were being sort of looked at to be preferred use in the national infrastructure, so getting agreement around which to use. So things like the ORCID Consortium and the Data Site Consortium were common to a lot of those national PID strategies. So there was probably others there, but there are also some differences, like Chris, you talked about value proposition more than the others did, I thought. That would obviously, any work that you do around that, the cost benefit analysis is going to be useful for all of us. So if we go back to the goals of this book, BoF, we were sort of looking at, should we form a working group or interest group to progress this discussion? So I'm sort of leaping into that because we don't have a lot of time to spare. However, could anyone please, who would like to speak, just jump in the chat, unmute yourself. Any of the speakers as well, just come back and share your camera. I think, Chris, you want to run the Menti? Yeah.
Yeah, Jessica's just got to run that in the background. in the interest of time, I keep saying, but we have 10 minutes. You can overrun. It will carry on, but obviously we don't want to go too far over. But yeah, I mean, the main question here is to, do we need another group? Because this is interesting, but outside of RDA, it's interesting. But do we need a group within RDA to, just needs time to eat? But don't we all? So yeah, sorry. I think because this is a BoF to decide whether we should have an interest group, because obviously that's the next stage within RDA. There's the PID IG. Peter's coming in here with some comment there. So even though it's a full discussion here, I think it's important to get as many, because also, we had one Global South strategy. It's heavily weighted towards Global North. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible, so we're trying to get as many to present now, and then building on this in an interest group, we can take the discussion into sort of a deeper level of the overlap between some of the strategies. I don't know if anyone wants to open their video microphone and come in. It's amazing what you can fit into 8.5 minutes.
I would highlight Natasha's comment, which led to the Gong series in the chat, which I think there's clearly common initiatives and efforts at the national level. So I think just simply getting a mapping of that in some kind of dynamic form, because it clearly is a rapidly moving landscape. So that would be one focused bit of work that a working group could consider. So it would encompass gathering the various information about the various strategies and then creating some kind of mapping and visualization about where there are intersections. Be one option.
It may also lead to some collaborative work. So some of the things that, the cost benefits analysis, as I was saying, that's something of quite of interest to us, and that would be of interest to a lot of PID groups, I imagine, to demonstrate the value. And maybe that's something that we can put some collective resources into.
That would be a great piece of work. I know in the Canadian context, I often hear, there's a tendency to just let the PID landscape naturally form, but and questions about, what's the value and all the rest. So that kind of report coming out of a working group would be hugely valuable. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry about this. I had trouble logging in earlier, so I missed a lot of the discussion. But I just wanted to bring in the idea of beyond international cooperation, we have to also think about supranatural national cooperation and trying to empower individuals who are not associated with the usual suspects to allow their research to be recognized. And the last person who was speaking that I caught about the Brazil experience and the Peru experience, they talk about the need with visitors coming in to log into the national systems. They have to supply private information, and it might be useful to have a passport identifier, that recognizes someone as a researcher, someone who has skills, and have those skills be recognized by their actions, and that would be a role of a persistent identifier of someone's contribution to a research project as part of perhaps a co-creator of some kind of activity, as not just citizen scientists, but as scientists who are engaging, not because they're part of a university, but because they can. And anyways, that's just throw that in, lob that in at the end, and I didn't hear the rest of the discussions. But
no, Peter, I think that's a really important point. And just to comment that ORCID is explicitly designed to be available to anyone, whether they're associated with an institution or not. So perhaps there is a way that we could think about how ORCID could be used, perhaps with some additional verification and connections to the National Federated Identity Management, to provide access and authentication for this and function as that passport. I think it's probably the best candidate at the moment because it is already open to those outside.
Right, and it has the space to do that. It's just a question of allowing allowing the persistence to be maintained by the person as opposed to some centralized organization, and how to do that. And certainly, I have a poster today that discusses how you might recognize the different aspects or different contributions of people to research. Anyways.
Thanks, Peter. Jessica, we've got a couple more polls, which I think we could just fit in. We've got 4 minutes left. You could take them up to 1 minute each, perhaps.
I switched.
But I think the RDA is great to reach out to an international audience, isn't it? So that community work, I think the RDA would help with that. Having an interest group that looks at these strategies.
Well, it might also inspire others who haven't got a national PID strategy yet to actually take steps to do that. Who just don't know where to start or have been thinking about it and just aren't sure how to go about it or what elements there might be in that. So it doesn't have to be just. I'm saying it doesn't have to be just those who have already got some sort of PID. National PID approach in place with those aspiring to have one.
We do have a final mentor meeting, which we might just want to pop up on. Finally, what kind of RDA activity would you find most helpful in promoting a sustainable PID landscape?
So is the intention that the information from people attending this event would lead to the development of a working group charter, or is that the goal?
Yeah, I mean that was the purpose of this BoF, really, to the main objective.
Okay.
And what it should achieve. And it's not been done already elsewhere.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, so now there's the question about the.
Thank you.
Audience. Yeah, sorry.
Just want Natasha keep chipping in here.
I was just waiting to see how people answered there. Yeah, if you are interested in this new working group or interest group, just put your name there. I think we already have 5 or so countries in there, so I think it's something that we could take forward, Chris.
Yeah. Just need volunteers.
Yeah.
Happy to help out with them.
Well, we've already got marketing people. We've got Adam there in marketing.
He makes the gongs, yeah.
He makes the gongs.
I'm so gutted I've lost my I love PID badge. I don't know where that is. Well, I'm not really gutted, but I like wearing something.
Here he is.
There you go. I'm happy to do gongs. I'm happy to do big badges. I'm happy to stick some things up on the washing line and take a picture of it. It's all good.
Awesome.
We've got 1 more minute, so we don't run out of time. People start leaving. I just want to thank all the presenters and everyone coming along, taking up time and effort put into running the session. So I just want to make sure I said that before everyone left.
That's great. I'm about to hit the imaginary gong, actually, Chris, because we're sort of at time. Yes, we'll need to decide whether it's an interest group or working group. We don't have time to debate that now, so we'll have to take that all offline, and we will just email everyone who's in this list and let them know what's happening. Are there any other last comments from any of our speakers?
I will just say that I can leave this Menti open for a while, so if you can, you can write some things on the last slide as comments, so you get the message.
Great. Any other last comments, Mark? No, you're just waving goodbye. All right, I'm hitting the imaginary gong now. have a good rest of the day, evening, wherever you are, people. And yeah,
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll
Thanks
be in
all.
touch.
Yeah.
This will be discussed everywhere for a long time. Thanks, Anna, Clifford, Jessica, Natasha. I think Mark's gone, but yeah, thanks again. Sorry, my chair is I'm very lenient to letting people go overrun, so I never want to interrupt, especially when they put a lot of time and effort into this.
We got a lot of great suggestions in the Menti, so I think it worked out. That's brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Josh. Super.
So I should let everyone overrun by 2 minutes. It takes up a lot of time, and also my introduction was lengthy. So anyway, I think we gathered enough information, and if people know about death by PowerPoint, well, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, as it turned out, I think that was the right discussion time. So
Yeah.
I think the recording still carries on actually until we've all left. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
careful what I say.
Right. I'm going to run off and get lunch in the next 14 minutes before my next.
I had a 5-minute lunch yesterday, and half of my supper in the kitchen and half my supper in front of the computer. So I'll say goodbye. Thank you again. Speak to you all again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Chris.